FM. Thanks for listening.
Welcome back to another hour of the Jazz Journey here on Franklin Public Radio. I'm Pamela Hines. You know, I'm feeling a binge coming on. Why don't we make it Keely Smith?
Actually, Carol's
Jamie, I just got this
Carol's
one
sister.
button I gotta hit, right?
and brother-in-law came with us, so the whole family.
Being at 7 o'clock, I'm calling the Community Preservation Committee meeting to order for February 7th, 2023. First item is approval of minutes for December 6th, 2022.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes of December 6, 2022.
Second.
Is there any questions, additions, omissions? None being said, all in favor of approval of minutes December 6th, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Jamie, on the executive session, is this just to approve the minutes and not release them actually? Or is this okay that becomes?
The matter's solved, so,
Okay.
like, literally solved, meaning the land that you talked about is now, as of last Wednesday, recorded under the town's ownership, so it's, it can be totally publicized.
Okay. So, next is the approval of executive session minutes for December 6th, 2022.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Are there any questions, comments? None being, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Jamie, there's not a specific time for the public hearing?
Nope, 7 o'clock,
Do we need to make a motion to open the public hearing?
yes.
Motion to open public hearing.
Second.
Okay, that's non-debatable. So it's, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. And I see a couple people there. Anyone in the audience have anything they would like to say? Project.
Actually, I do have an idea. So, I'm Mark Minichelli. You want me to state my name and address?
Please.
31 Longfellow Drive in Franklin. I obviously didn't put much effort into putting a proposal together. And I don't know whether this actually even fits into your purview, but we have several green spaces around the town that have trails going through them. And one of the things that occurred to me recently, since my mom is still a Franklin resident, and she's 93 years old, but she's, for all intents and purposes, if we were to try to get her on trails, she would be wheelchair bound. So it occurred to me as I was thinking about this agenda item, is there anything that we could do in terms of projects to make some of the trails in some of the green spaces more ADA compliant? I know from personal experience, having friends that became wheelchair bound, that the opportunity, when I lived in another location, to have the opportunity to get out and enjoy some of the public green spaces was a real bonus for those that are generally cooped up indoors. So again, I don't know if it falls under the purview of this committee, but if it was possible to dedicate some monies to convert some, to make some of the trails, for example, at Delcartes. Delcartes is a relatively flat green space. Many of the trails at Delcartes, except for the trail that goes over the dam there, many of the trails at Delcartes are wooded, woodland paths with, you know, lots of roots and bumps. And is there an opportunity for some additional ADA compliant trails to be designed and developed in some of the existing green spaces that we have around town today? But anyways, that's my idea. Not much of a project proposal, but
I think it's very valid. Yeah. Thank you. Jamie?
Through Mr. Chairman, so this committee necessarily wouldn't deal with the design of it or choosing it necessarily as much as financing it. Just for everybody watching at home, the Conservation Commission is right now going through their open space and recreational plan process. It's a 7-year plan. I think a lot of groups have been invited. There's so many opportunities to comment. I do know that there are several concepts being worked out through that planning procedure process relative to this issue. I think that they're going to look for greater ADA accessibility on current town properties. I don't know if they're going to specify exactly which ones and where, but I know that ADA will be a pretty big component of it. And then eventually, when that open space plan gets approved by both the Conservation Commission and eventually the Town Council, forwarded to the state, the Commonwealth then looks at it, they comment on it, and then we approve it. Once that plan's finalized, I have no doubt that the Community Preservation Committee will have more projects and more ideas than probably we can fund out of that plan. So it is certainly something that we've been doing. And I would just make one other comment about it. We've definitely upped, Nason Street Tot Lot's a great example that was funded through CPC. And the ADA accessibility, particularly for playgrounds, is something where in the past we were doing basically the minimum with like the wood chips. And, the ECDC and some of the other playgrounds we've done have been much more accessible. And I know Ryan Jetty is basically, and I have talked to most people that when we're redoing playgrounds, we're looking at doing the surfacing and the amenities at a much higher level than we've done in the past. And that's a large portion because of CPC. So Nason Street obviously hasn't been built yet, but next year it will be. And, we've met with a lot of stakeholders down in that neighborhood too, a lot of residents that seem to be really happy about some of the improvements. So it's something that's certainly on our radar and very, very important for sure.
Thank you. Does anyone on the committee have it? Wayne?
Yeah, I appreciate the input. I think what I'll do is, at our next meeting of the Recreation Advisory Board, I will bring that issue up of making those, what's involved with making those compliant, ADA compliant and so forth. But it's a good suggestion, and I will carry it forward. Thank you.
Could I just add one more additional
Yes.
comment? So it wasn't my intent to try to wholesale make, the entire path route system at any of the parks ADA compliant, but at least some subset, I think,
Yeah.
would be very helpful.
Yep. Yep.
That makes sense. Good.
Does any,
Just through the chair.
Rick?
Again, thank you for your input. I used to work as a regional manager for a wheelchair company, a mobility company, and you meet tons of people that have disabilities, especially a lot of families with ALS and MS and things like that. And they would love nothing more than to be able to go out in the woods and hike and look at leaves and foliage and birds and nature. And it's something that as people that don't have disabilities, we take for granted, I think, and sometimes unless it's presented to you, you don't think about it like that. So again, thank you for your input.
A lot of disabled veterans that are now coming
Yeah.
back, IED explosions, missing legs and arms, and so again.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anyone on the committee that has a project they want to bring forward? Is there anyone in the audience at home that wants to speak or bring something forward? Jamie, do you have?
Yeah, really quickly, I just wanted to share a couple things. I think both of us might, some of you all, the rest of you might have received an email from Alan Earls. So Alan had a conflict tonight, and I just wanted to relay for the record some of these ideas. He had three. The first is there are some rumors or discussions. I think in Bellingham they might have had a meeting or two. I'm not quite sure yet. But Maplegate Country Club could certainly see some sort of development proposal at some point in the future. It is a Chapter 61 property. I don't know exactly what all will go on. There's been a lot of talk for many years. I think what Alan's suggesting is that on the other side of the swamp, Maplegate has a nice view out into the water there. And at least whatever is being proposed there, whether it's industrial, residential, it's unlikely, and I agree with Alan, by the way, it's unlikely the price will be something we can budget for, because it's a very large piece of land, obviously. But his suggestion is, to try to make some sort of public accessibility piece, if there's a portion of CPC funds that could be used to have some sort of public access. Of course, that just depends on the use. I'm sure if there's an industrial use, which I don't think it is, by the way, I think that makes it harder. If it's residential, we might be able to work with them. But obviously, part of that land is also in Bellingham. But I just wanted to relay for the record his suggestion to think about that property as it works through the process.
Jamie, do you
Yep.
know how much of that property is in Franklin and how much is in Bellingham?
I think most of it's in Franklin. I don't know exactly the acreage off the top of my head, but it's mostly in Franklin. And the parking lot, some of those areas where you can see out into the water are. The second idea he had was Jim Johnson's house, the Oliver Pond home. There's an exhibit in the Historical Museum. It's been on the market for some time, I believe. And if I'm not mistaken, it's certainly one of the 5 oldest homes in Franklin.
Yes.
Maybe the oldest, Phyllis? Close to?
I think it's close to the oldest.
One of the oldest homes, if not the oldest. For those who don't know where his house is, as you turn the corner off Route exit 17 and go down towards BJ's, down deep there, there's a home. Some people think it's an abandoned house, but it's not. It's actually a home that was built in 1790, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so I know Jim is trying to sell it. He's suggesting possibly preservation of that. I would agree with him on the concept. The difficulty is, what's the price and where does it go and what do you do with it? So this is the challenge, I think, Phyllis, you're aware, and many other folks with historical preservation properties of homes. It's just really expensive, and without a use, you just end up buying something and it just sits there. Moving that house will not be simple. That is an extraordinarily expensive project. So, and then finally, his other suggestion is, which CPC funded last year, for the town clerk's office, some record maintenance down in the vault, and he's suggesting that either the town clerk, library, historical commission, and museum may have some additional needs for digitization or records preservation. I do agree to some degree. I don't know. He's not exactly saying anything specific, but I will say with our town archivist down at the museum, Rowan, we had the state archivist come out and do an assessment of our historical resources just before the pandemic. And one of the suggestions in her report was to have an internal staff working group among those entities to decide where are our records, what's the archiving policy for the future, what needs to be digitized, what needs to be stayed in public records law and print, and try to get our arms around all of our files, and even including the planning board, down in the planning office, get all those files together and figure out exactly what the game plan is for preservation. You can't preserve them all. We don't need to preserve them all, but let's try to prioritize what's needed. And Nancy did a great job last year with her money, and I think my guess is there'll be more proposals in the future on that. Then, aside from Mr. Earls, my sheet in front of me, there's no recommendations formally tonight before you for a vote. That'll be next month, but I do know of a few projects that the town will be requesting. We'll go through the budget sheet in a moment, but we're going to be requesting $325,000 this year for recreation department improvements. One project is at Fletcher Field. We need some additional money due to the cost overruns at Nason Street Tot Lot, and also finishing off the Beaver Street Challenge Course project. And then also, we'll be looking at a proposal likely from the Housing Authority relative to some upgrades over there. If folks remember, the last 2 years, we gave that 10% to the Franklin Ridge project, which, by the way, may have been low dollars, but all those appropriations added up and helped our application with MassWorks, the state grant program, and that's where we got the $3.5 million MassWorks grant last October. So even though the money for Franklin Ridge hasn't been spent with any hammers and nails building a unit, it's still, those authorizations helped state our case to the state of why we needed a bigger chunk of money. So now, in total, there's about $4.5 to $5 million for the Franklin Ridge project. And in order to get the remaining funds from the state or federal government on that, we got to show some actual work up there first. So that'll be taking place for the next year or two. And so we reached out to the Housing Authority to talk to Lisa, because obviously they're in great need of some projects over there too. And then finally, I don't have any numbers on it yet, and I don't have any specifics, but as all of you know, the Old South Church Meeting House down on Washington Street got reappropriated this year. That has gone to, we did an expressions for interest, a request for proposals. Unfortunately, Habitat for Humanity did agree to purchase that building. And the town council and, our office and Habitat right now are trying to work out the preservation restriction, which was a condition of selling off that land. What does that mean? It means basically keeping the building white, getting rid of the lead paint, and keeping the pillars. And really it's about the facade, right? That was what the town council really prioritized, was the external facade. We will get the bell out, and we will bring it to the museum or somewhere if it'll fit through a door. I don't know yet.
Bring it to Jimmy Johnson's house.
As if he can fit anything more in his house. But it would fit very naturally in there. So there'll likely be something coming in down in the future once we start to peel that onion back a little bit that might be a candidate. I just want to remind all the committee as well as everybody watching at home, last year by statute, because we were a new CPA year, we had to have the required hearing with kind of an end date, a deadline. Right now, for forever, unless the law changes, the CPC can take any application from anybody at any time. So if somebody applies in July, we can certainly consider it. So it's now on a rolling basis. And as many towns will tell you, after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, most of the bigger projects usually get out of the way, and then eventually it just becomes rolling applications. So I just want for the folks that are watching at home to realize we have to put the legal ad out 2 weeks in advance by state law. So we have to do it, but that doesn't mean the deadline is now. So people could still come to the next meeting, offer feedback, have ideas, and so I just want to make sure everybody's aware that, you know, just because we had a public hearing tonight doesn't mean tonight's the only night people can offer feedback. They could email us tomorrow, any day of the year. There's an application right on our website, on our accounts payable. And if people want to apply on Viewpoint, they can apply for an application there, or they can simply email us and call us like they've done for some of you and me. So that's about it.
Is there anyone else that has anything? Anyone at home that would like to ask a question or bring something forward? I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close the hearing.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none? Jamie?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I handed out a sheet, which is in front of everyone. Y'all can take it home and look it all over and do whatever you want to do. But the key line I want to point out to folks is all the way down at the bottom on the left. It says balances as of 6/30/23. Okay. So in the left-hand column are the appropriations that have been made based on the recommendations of this body. As you can see here, still a fair amount of the work has yet to be done. Just for folks on updates, Maple Hill, Schmidt Farm, and the Dalzell open space, all of those properties have been properly recorded at the Registry of Deeds. So that makes the Community Preservation Committee in 18 months protected 200 acres exactly of open space, which is pretty good. So for those of you who have lived in town most of your life, you probably never thought you'd see a day where anything would be bought, but here we are. Good news. It's the definition of community preservation, right? I mean, it's pretty cool. Some of the other projects that are here are some of the minor expenditures of administrative items at the top, dues. We've been working on Washington Street to see if we can get any other affordable housing. And then you go down the Red Brick Schoolhouse. A lot of that project has been complete. We are stuck in supply chain problems. Even little old red brick schoolhouses can't order windows and doors. So those will come when they come. But once those come, hopefully that'll complete the close to the first phase of that project. The vault project by the town clerk is wrapping up. The cupola on the museum has not been started at all. I wouldn't anticipate anything until this summer. And then you just keep walking down. The Pear Corp. King Street Memorial Park is part of the effort to try to redesign and enhance the entire parcel. We're continuing to work on those drafts, and then some of the appraisal work for the open space. You end up getting down to the balances of 630 based on our actual borrowing and actual money flow. This is a better chart than the last time because now we have actual borrowed numbers from Schmidt Farm. And you'll see down the bottom, all the way over to the middle, which is budgeted reserve. So we anticipate to have approximately 1.57 million in budgeted reserve by the end of June if we don't spend anything other. Now the projects I just mentioned, it would be about $500,000, so you would deduct that off that number. So if the committee approved some of those recreation projects, as well as some financing for the housing authority, that line item would go down to about $1 million in budgeted reserve. And then you move over to the far right, and you're looking at 1.662 million left. Some of that is really admin expenses, and we undershot the housing commitment in year 2 by $1,640. So somehow we'll have to make that up to hit the 10% from the previous 2 years. But basically, all of our 10% requirements, with that exception, have been met for the first 2 years of CPC. What this budgeted reserve, what this balance on 6/30/23 does not tell us is what the budget for FY24 will be. So these are just the balances left thus far that we essentially have in the bank or will receive by June 30th. The next meeting, I hope to have before everybody a proposed budget for FY24, which would obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but that will raise an additional 1.7 million approximately in revenue for next fiscal year. So in other words, even despite the 2 historic open space purchases, there still is a good, healthy budgeted reserve in CPC in the event, something else big comes up.
So the 24 budget that you're saying you'd have for us, we would actually get that money in November of 23?
Yes. So we'll put a budget out based on our anticipated revenues. The percentage, they're anticipating the percentage going down for the state match in FY24, but still it looks like we'll get probably 30 cents on the dollar. So you're still looking at $500,000 in state match roughly. That would be in addition to the local piece of 1.7, so you'd be over possibly $2 million next fiscal year.
And the last time we met, I had a question about were we going to receive additional funds from the state?
Yeah.
Did that?
It came in.
That was right.
Yeah. So that letter that you and I had to sign,
Yeah.
it was totally irrelevant 2 weeks later because then the money came in.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do?
Take the money.
Spend it.
Right.
Now you can spend it.
Exactly.
So,
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Explain again the community housing, that's 1640. What is that?
so we guessed in year 1 and year 2, year 2 we guessed much more accurately. 10% of the money you take each year has to go to affordable housing.
Yep.
So over a 2-year period, we underfunded that requirement by $1,640.
We underfunded or underspent?
Right.
Well, both. You underspent.
Yeah, because we allocated the correct
Basically, you'll
amount.
get a resolution from me eventually saying appropriate $1,640 to Franklin Ridge, yeah.
Okay.
And that'll suffice the 10% requirement for this current fiscal year.
Right, but so we allocated the right amount, we just didn't spend it all. correct?
No,
No?
We didn't allocate the right amount. I should have, instead of 320,000, it should have been $321,640.
Okay. Let's get into some detail here.
Yeah, the auditors noticed,
Yeah.
as they should.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we pay them $45,000 a year just to do this, so.
Yeah.
I have no shame in that, just was a little short. Not uncommon in your first year or two, because you don't get the match until a year and a half later, so you don't know what you're aiming at. In the case of historic preservation and open space, we far exceeded the 10% requirement. So there was no question, even though we didn't predict exactly the dollar amount in the first year, we still spent well in excess of that, and it just comes out, the excess just comes out of the budget reserve.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Jamie, do you mind just refreshing my memory what the Dalzell open space land was?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chairman, that's the 17 acres
He
adjacent.
wasn't at the last meeting.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's 17 acres, right next to Schmidt Farm. If you're looking on the map, if you just look at a straight town map,
Yep.
it's just to the west of it.
Okay.
So there's two parcels, Schmidt, the Dalzell property, there's one other parcel, and then the town of Bellingham's line, the town line.
Gotcha.
So the 17 acres was what the executive session was on. And ultimately, as everybody knows, the family basically called us up after they heard about Schmidt Farm and offered that 17 acres at a pretty discounted rate. And they have every right to do that. There was no 61 provisions, there was no statutory provisions, there was nothing else. It was just privately owned land. And they chose to sell it to the town for $250,000. You can access it through Tia Place if you're into hiking, and you go up on the water treatment tower, and there's an amazing trail network back there.
Thank you.
What was the price?
$250,000 for 17 acres.
Wow, thank you.
Anyone else? Jamie, anything
That's
else?
it.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none? Thank you.
Nice job.
Yeah.